And now, The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa CIB, equipping you with efficient and secure cash management solutions for your business. Good evening. Welcome to the program. I'm Stephen Grootes. 9 minutes after 6 the time. Well, plenty going on as always. I mean, gold just shooting the lights out. Unbelievable to see where gold has been. And we're sort of seeing a boost in some sectors of our mining industry. Some people tell me that they are seeing a bit more demand for services associated with mining consultants, things like that. We'll see how it all goes. And obviously with commodities, you never really know where the cycle will sort of end, but you know that there is a cycle. That's what you do know. I think with artificial intelligence, it's something different. And the Economist having quite a big story actually about what would happen if AI turns out to be a bubble. So you have all of the huge amount of capital, money, flooding into the US and flooding into AI, but it's really going into 10 companies. And what happens actually if it turns out that it's not a good choice to spend? In other words, those companies start to lose value, and all of the people who've put money in start to lose value as well. Now, don't get me wrong. I've no evidence to say that this is a bubble of some kind, but it is a huge amount of money that's flooding in there, and you do just wonder if maybe some things are beginning to be overvalued. To put it another way, let me ask you this, and I know you'll have a view. Has AI changed anything in your world? I've used it precisely once to create a particular image that I needed. But has it changed anything? And I realize when you search on your phone, and I sort of don't include that, I suppose I should, you start to see AI results rather than website results. But has AI changed your world or your job in any way? Examples, please. 011 8830 702, then 021 446 0567. Your voice notes as well on 072 702 1702. We'll hear from Dr Azar Jammine in just a moment. These changes to that were gazetted last week basically will make it easier for smaller companies to dismiss workers who aren't performing. It's been one of the long lamented complaints of smaller firms. They have the same regulatory burden as bigger firms when it comes to employment. You'll hear from Ulrik Bengtsson. He is the CEO at Sun International, SunBet, their online gambling service, having a big year. Also domestic workers, and you heard the story in the EWN bulletin. The sort of good news is that their pay is going up significantly. The bad news is that the burden that domestic workers face, and the domestic worker in your life may well be your mother or your daughter, may well be someone who works in your home. There are lots of different directions this can go. And in most cases, it turns out that they're the only breadwinner. And the heartbreaking number is, since COVID, the number of domestic workers who've been let go for whatever reason. Often the families that employ them can't afford it anymore. And then you're stuck, aren't you? I mean, that's where things get very, very difficult. We'll speak to Lorandi Kriel, the CEO of Sweep South, and we'll talk more about AI with Peter Armitage, the CEO of Anchor Capital, before 7 o'clock. What if it is a bubble? Good to hear from you tonight. Of course, we will also talk about wiggly earthworms in a little while. Good evening, 12 minutes after 6.
The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app
and DSTV channel 856.
Well, the Minister of Employment and Labour, Nkosazana Meth, gazetting new regulations that seem to make it easier for smaller companies to remove workers who are not performing or producing the goods. The system also is supposed to now make it easier to resolve disputes more quickly, and an employer will no longer have to warn a worker that they could be fired for not performing. In other words, a worker would not be told they had to improve before they went. If you're a boss, that makes it easier to manage. If you're a worker, well, you might feel quite aggrieved that you weren't given the chance to improve. The Director-in-Chief Economist at Econometrix is Dr Azar Jammine. Azar, good evening. Really appreciate the time, as always, on The Money Show. I mean, for years, business groups have made the point it's ridiculous to have the same legal burden on big companies and on small companies. Do these reforms make any significant difference?
Theoretically, I suppose it changes the atmosphere around setting up a small business. There can be little doubt, and I've come across it in practical situations on a number of occasions, that there is a distinct reluctance to go into business if you know that you can, and to employ a person if you know that you cannot get rid of him very easily if he proves to be not up to scratch. And that has been a massive constraint on employment creation in the country. South Africans need to realize that one of the big fault lines of the economy is that the small business sector in this country is far, far weaker and less omnipotent than it is in other emerging markets. And then you look at their growth rates and you see why their growth rates are so much stronger and why they don't suffer the same levels of unemployment as South Africa. And I suppose this is an attempt at trying to address this, because people have often complained that the burden on small businesses is just unsupportable, especially for the entrepreneurs who set it up. They've got instead of spending their time looking at business opportunities and marketing their goods, they have to worry about whether or not they can fire someone whom they've employed and who is just not up to scratch.
I mean, there are lots of different ways to look at our economy. I find the easiest actually is to look at it as insiders and outsiders. And what we're talking about here is people who could go from being an outsider to being employed, becoming an insider. And the current legislation has always made it very hard for you to remove an insider and make it an outsider. And the cost seems to have been, or make that person an outsider, the cost seems to have been, that's made it harder for outsiders to become insiders. I hope I make sense.
You make absolute sense, and I think we see the where it all comes together, the interface, in the tremendous opposition that is being brought to bear on this bill by the trade unions, because clearly they are the insiders who've been fortunate. Their workers are fortunate enough to have jobs in the formal sector, and they're nicely protected, and they're earning well. And they feel that as soon as it becomes easier for people to join small businesses and not be fired at a moment's notice, this will erode the power of the trade unions. And so we see this is a classic area of the ideological divide that exists in South African society that is making it almost impossible for economic growth to accelerate.
The view there from Dr. Azar Jammine. Azar, thank you so much. Director and Chief Economist at Econometrix, 17 after 6.
The Money Show on 702.
Monday to Friday, 6 to 8 p.m.
Well, the massive rise in online gambling having a big impact on Sun International. Its headline earnings per share up 60% in the 6 months to the end of June. A big part of that, a 70% increase in income from its SunBet platform. There are some suggestions, though, it may have to make changes to part of its business model because of the pressure on the casino market. Ulrik Bengtsson is the CEO at the Sun International Group. Ulrik, good evening and thanks for your time. A strong performance overall. You do mention some operational issues with casinos. What kind of issues are you seeing? Is it just a lack of demand?
Hi, thank you for having me. Well, we are pleased with the results, 6.7% growth overall, and as you point out, the SunBet business growing very nicely, but also our Sun Slots business is actually growing now at 2%, but nevertheless, yes, the gaming business is under a bit of pressure. Market this year is down 3.75%. We are doing slightly better than that, but as you mentioned, we also have seen that we do have some operational challenges in that business that we need to address. It's in our gaming business, it's about our mix of machines and also the investment in machines. On a table business, it's pricing in some of the operational procedures, but it's also more broadly how well we actually convert the footfall we have to our properties into the gaming business. So there are lots to go after, and we look forward to working with the teams to execute.
Getting people to spend money, isn't that always the challenge?
Yeah.
I do need to talk about your proposed deal with Peermont, and you both walked away from that. It looked at the time that this was because of delays at the competition tribunal, and there was a big delay there, and I was wondering in your SEND statement if you were sort of pointing to that when you referred to regulatory issues. Was it just the delay that made you both walk away in the end?
Yeah, it was the delay. I don't think that's what we mean when we talk regulatory issues. I think it's more regulatory environment more broadly. But we had a backstop, as is common practice in these types of agreements, and we reached the backstop date, and we're not able to sort of get further on it. And on back of that, we had a mutual agreement to terminate the transaction.
You could probably have changed the date if you'd wanted to. Did the deal just not make the same sense it did when it was first proposed?
I think the deal absolutely made some strategic sense. I mean, to be honest, I wasn't part of the company at that point in time, and not privy to the full strategic rationale. But I'm sure the strategic merits of the deal make sense in one shape or form. But the agreement was mutual at that point, that the best way forward was to terminate.
The huge increase in revenue from Sunbet, from online gambling, it was up 70%. How important is that part of the business becoming for you?
It's becoming very important part of our business, as you can see in the number. The share of the Sunbet business of the total EBITDA number is growing. Now, 70% is a large number, but you also have to recognize that it's from a relatively small base still. Our land-based gaming business is still by a mile our biggest contributor, so it's still growing from a relatively small base. But if something grows 70% for a long time, all of a sudden it becomes a big business.
No, of course. There's a lot of competition in this market. I mean, we can all see that. Is it going to become a little bit crowded, do you think?
Experience from most other markets in Europe or in the US is that this tends to be a crowded market, particularly on the casino side. Over time, you most likely will see fewer and larger players and less of smaller players, simply because the investments are quite large in this space as well. We tend to think about this as lower investment than in properties, but actually when you're building big technology platforms, it's also quite an investment.
It does seem, and Ulrik, I'm not in the industry, you are, but online gambling seems to be sucking a huge amount of money out of people's pockets. And there are some other numbers that have been looking at that more recently. Is that sustainable? I mean, for a long time in South Africa, a lot of the people who are gambling can't really afford to lose money.
Well, I think, first of all, the digital conversion of products and services is a global mega trend that I don't think any of us can stop. And it's not only in gambling, it's in all categories across society. And I think we're not doing ourselves a favor to think that we can somehow stop that. I think that's a problem. I think you need to embrace that and say this is actually what the consumers want. They want to consume products this way. It's easier and more convenient, whether it's your general entertainment or your shopping or your entertainment in form of gambling. So I think that is just something in the direction the society is moving. We of course have the benefit of also having physical assets. So our job is to make sure that we enable the customer to play in the way the customer wants to play. If they want to play online, they can play online. If they want to play in our properties, they can play in our properties. And also for those customers who want to have a seamless experience between those two, we want to build the opportunity for them to have that. So it becomes the focus on the customer, I think, is what's important here.
So, I mean, I understand all of that, but it is surely true that more people in South Africa are gambling online than ever gambled in any group of casinos before. That must be true if you look at just the sheer level of advertising. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing it. And I realize that it is your job, and I understand that. I mean, I've no problem with that. It is your job to capitalize on that. I just wonder if at some point you might find there's actually quite a big pushback against you from parts of society. Because, I mean, we've seen food companies or restaurant companies telling us how much money is actually being sucked out of the economy through online gambling. And this is an industry you're a part of. And I can't help but wonder if, in fact, there's going to be a big reaction at some point.
There are many questions in that. Let me try to untangle it. First of all, I don't know if it's more people that gamble in total in the country. Remember, the land-based industry has seen quite a decline over time. But But let's say for sake of argument that you are right. I think you used the word sucked out of economy. I don't think that's 100% correct. I mean, we pay gambling taxes, we pay VAT on this, we employ a huge amount of people in our online business, highly qualified jobs in technology, digital marketing, etc., etc. So it's not like we do not contribute and that this does not contribute. Now, to your point on the responsibility we have, you're absolutely right. We have an enormous responsibility to make sure that we also assist in protecting the customers, make sure they have tools to control their playing and make sure that nobody sort of gets in a situation they shouldn't be in. There's no doubt about that. But the alternative to having a regulated online gambling industry in South Africa is that you have an unregulated, illegal online betting industry outside of South Africa. Then players have no protection and you have no tax revenue. So even though the situation might not always be perfect, the alternatives are less perfect.
Thank you. I appreciate that. The Patricia de Lille, the tourism minister, I don't know if she has much of an impact on your hotel business, but there's been a lot going on there. She's fired the board of SA Tourism. Are you finding that government is doing enough to encourage tourism, which will obviously help your business?
I don't want to weigh in on local politics yet. If you
sure, no, I understand. Yes.
I mean, as a general comment, of course, we welcome all support we can possibly get to help us build technology talent for our business and talent for our business and support for our hospitality business as well. So support is always welcome.
Ulrik, thank you very much indeed. Ulrik Bengtsson, the CEO at the Sun International Group, on The Money Show this evening, 26 minutes after 6.
The Money Show.
The Markets.
Gustav Schullenberg's portfolio manager at the Old Mutual Investment Group. Gustav, good evening. Quite a strong update, really, from Sun International. To look at the numbers, they're doing very nicely.
Yeah. Good evening, Stephen and listeners. They are doing well. They've de-geared nicely. I think in time maybe the Piermont deal could turn out to be a blessing in disguise for them. But the business is doing well, and the online gaming that you guys discussed now is really doing well and growing strongly. So good update, nice divvy, good cash. So very very well done.
I mean, obviously a lot of competition in the online gambling space, but still clearly on the numbers, a lot of room for growth.
Yeah, so typically in other markets globally, you have 3 or 4 that dominate the space because there is some overlap in the offerings. It seems like Sunbet will be one of those. One could in time find a bit of consolidation in the industry. You know, the Betways and the Hollywood Bets are also big. Tsogo are investing a lot into theirs. So you will probably find it concentrating more as time passes.
AVI results today. They had 1 or 2 problems with their fashion chain supply chains. Their INJ did quite nicely, but abalone prices were soft. How do you see AVI's results?
Yeah, I thought it was good. AVI, it's a very well-run company, capital light. You can see the cash flow conversion, the dividend yield or the dividend they're able to pay. So we're quite excited about it. It seems like there is some growth program for next year. Fashion coming off a low base, INJ. The rest of the business, excluding fashion, did superbly well. So I think in a tough environment, they continue to deliver.
I'm beginning to run out of words to describe what's been happening with the gold price, Gustav, because it's just been so extraordinary. You might have some left. I mean, I just don't know where this ends.
Yeah, I suppose, an asset like that is very hard to value. So we're having the same troubles. But, there's a lot of money still globally sitting on the sidelines in other kind of quasi-safe haven assets, your treasuries and so on, that could still find their way into gold, and it's a finite asset. So only fools would try and pick a top. But, when a metal like that doubles over 2 years, then one has to ask yourself whether it's probably healthy for it to take a bit of a pause Who knows?
I mean, the only way this changes is if there's sort of peace breaks out in multiple places, including Washington, and that seems for the moment to be unlikely.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a few things that normally drive gold, and I say normally, and that obviously is U.S. interest rates. They seem to be heading downwards from here, if we can believe what we read, and that should support the gold price. Then, you know, Trump is clearly keen to weaken the dollar. That should be supportive for gold. The fact that from a supply perspective, there's not a lot of gold around, so you can't kill the demand with supply. And then obviously the central banks all over the world are currently favoring gold for their reserves over dollars. So there's a few tailwinds going, and I don't know whether I'm brave enough to pick the inflection in that.
Gustav, thanks very much indeed. Gustav Schullenberg, Portfolio Manager at the Old Mutual Investment Group. Just gone 6:30.
WhatsApp Stephen
on 072
702
1702.
Well, one of the conversations you heard in that interview with the CEO at Sun International was about the sort of change that we see in the world in terms of moving away from the physical experience. And Metrofile talking about that. You'll know Metrofile. They look after documents, make sure they're securely shredded and all of that. They say there's been an increase in instructions from clients to destroy physical documents. And what that means is those documents, if they still need them, are being stored in the cloud. And for Metrofile, they do compete in that space, but I imagine there's probably a lot more competition in terms of doing that. And just in thinking a little bit about that transition, quite a few WhatsApps coming through on 072 702 1702 about online gambling. Jason asking what's going to happen with massive asset rentals and foot traffic with Sun International. I don't know if you ever walked into a casino. I don't think so. I think you drive there or you go in a bus or something, but I don't know if you walk there. But I hear your point. Michelle saying, how to market gambling is something people want. Yuck. People are gambling because they're desperate. Exclamation mark. And Michelle, in case you're wondering how she feels about it, has added this. Michelle, I hope I do it justice. Grrr, she says. She's pretty irritated about it. I don't know if you've had much experience with any kind of online gambling or if it's affected someone in your family. I have to say that I haven't. I have seen people who I can see from what they're doing, the sort of gamified aspect of it, that must be gambling, the noise their phones make. But I don't think you can tap someone on the shoulder and say, oi, what are you doing? I think they'll be perfectly in their rights to tell you to go and disappear, and firmly. But we do know that, money is being spent there. So your experiences, please, on 011-883-0702 and 021-446-0567. 21 minutes now to 7.
The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
and DSTV channel 856.
16 minutes to 7 the time. Well, kind of a sort of Southern African story, I suppose. You don't really see this in many other countries, but new numbers coming out today showing what the financial picture is like for domestic workers, for the person in your family who makes a living and perhaps the living for your family by working in someone's home, or maybe for the person who spends their day in your home. And while there has been quite a significant increase in take-home pay, nearly half of our domestic workers are still earning below the minimum wage. You may remember the minimum wage doesn't apply to farm workers and domestic workers. Lorandi Kriel is the CEO of Sweep South. Lorandi, good evening. How's the financial picture changing for domestic workers?
Stephen, the financial picture for domestic workers remain bleak, with most not able to make ends meet. But what is positive is over the last 5 years, we have seen an improvement in those that are able to save, from 8% in 2021 till 13% in 2025. Although incremental, it is something positive.
Where's that extra ability coming from? I mean, I can't imagine the demands on the income has reduced, and I'd be kind of surprised if their salaries have increased much.
So domestic workers' salaries have increased incrementally since the minimum wage came into effect for domestic workers in March 2022. Although not everybody is compliant, we are seeing an uptick in earnings. Our view is that where this savings are coming from is from the immense financial discipline that domestic workers show. You know, they support a whole family of 4 on an average salary of 4,500 rand a month, putting kids through school, food on the table, electricity, data, and a roof over their heads. So that's quite amazing.
It really is extraordinary. The pandemic saw the start of a process, Lorandi, where many domestic workers were actually without work. So the people that employed them, I suppose in many cases, the families that employed them, let them go. And there seemed to be a lot of financial stress that was happening. I realize some people left, but it seemed that people were making a decision they could not go on like this. Is that still happening, or has that trend abated a bit?
So that is still happening. So pre-COVID, we had 1.2 million work opportunities available for domestic workers. When we did this study last year, there was 850,000 work opportunities available, and that has decreased even further to about 815,000. So the trend is still downwards.
That's a massive shift. I mean, it's a massive shift in a society like ours where domestic workers are the main source of income. I mean, the consequences of this, I can't imagine many of them are able to find work elsewhere if you look at the economy.
Yes, you're 100% true. So what most of them do is 85% of domestic workers work for more than one family. They often work reduced hours or reduced days that has an impact on their real income at the end of every month.
There's I made the point a moment ago that this is kind of almost uniquely Southern African. I don't know of many other societies where you have someone working in someone else's home in this way. Now, we all understand the reasons. It's kind of the lived experience of our society, our history, our racialized inequality. But the real reason is that there's no other work, no other way to get an income. Do you see anything shifting in this that is likely to see the situation changing in the longer term? I mean, the trend that you describe of domestic workers being without work, I find frightening. At the same time, though, I imagine many domestic workers have much more ambition than doing what they're doing now. They have other things they would like to do and earn more income. Do you see that changing at all, improving in any way?
Yes, we see that. A lot of sweepstarts that use our platform use it as a springboard to go into other things, like their own business. A lot of them go into nursing, into teaching. They're on the platform while they're saving money to study or go elsewhere. What is very heartwarming is to see 86% of domestic workers want a formal education, and a lot of them pursue elderly care certification, and when they go into those career pathways, they do earn more. So we have done a lot of research in South Africa and also internationally. And if you look at the care economy globally, it's booming. It's also growing in South Africa, north of the 300 billion by 2030. That's childcare and elderly care together. So we have designed a pathway for unemployed and underemployed women and domestic workers to go into these career paths, into elder care or childcare, and our vision is to place them abroad where they earn dollars or euros and make a better living for themselves and their family.
I mean, that kind of opportunity is extraordinary. So are a lot of the people who come onto your platform then sort of younger domestic workers temporarily as a first job rather than as a last job?
Yeah, I'll say in the middle. The average domestic worker is about between 26 years to 42 years old, with a median age of 38. So not too young, and also not too old, but kind of in the prime of their life, I want to say.
Yeah. Lorandi, I mean, there was a time, I don't know if your survey still asks this, but there was a time when your annual survey also asked about job satisfaction. And I think the question used to be about how valued domestic workers felt by the families that employ them. Now, on one level, you can tell the value because they're not being paid very much, and that's frightening. But do you still ask questions like that? I mean, what do people tell you about how they feel in terms of how valued they are by the families they work for?
Yes, we do. We do ask questions along those lines. So this year we focused on abuse in the workplace, and it is frightening to still see, 18% verbal abuse for women, physical abuse, sexual abuse in the workplace. We ask that. We do ask about, working for families and relating to mental health. So, this year and last year both we saw a 16% decline in mental health for domestic workers. So yeah, we do tap into that. What is good to see is that those domestic workers that go into elder care work, either via our platform or via other channels, they do enjoy that type of work much more, and they have high levels of satisfaction.
Lorandi Creel, thank you so much, CEO at Sweep South. Really do appreciate the time. 8 minutes to 7.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa CIB, equipping you with efficient and secure cash management solutions for your business.
Well, good to hear from you this evening. There was a suggestion today from Zwelinzima Vavi, the General Secretary at SAFTU, talking about ArcelorMittal South Africa, in which he suggested that government should renationalize it. And I suppose the question is, okay, but what then? Where do you go after that? Because it's making a loss now. It's unlikely, if you look at global steel demand, to make a profit at any time in the future or to break even. So essentially what government would be doing would be subsidizing an industry and subsidizing jobs. Now, you could probably make an argument for that, but we've already put, I think it was 1.7 billion rand from the Industrial Development Corporation. At what point do you stop? And how far do you go? I don't know how far renationalization takes you. I realize that's what unions ideologically want. I understand, I think, the arguments for it. I'm just not sure that it's going to have any impact whatsoever.
702. Stephen is on X.
At Stephen Grootes.
A fascinating story in the Economist newspaper today asking the question, what would happen if all of the investment, all of the capital that's been poured into artificial intelligence stocks turns out to have been badly spent? In other words, if the AI boom becomes a bust. Peter Armitage is the CEO at Anchor Capital. Peter, good evening. I mean, so much money, so much capital has gone into AI stocks, and we're really talking about 10 American companies. Is the Economist right to ask the question at least?
Yeah, absolutely, Stephen. The extent of it, I think, is quite hard to comprehend. I mean, they're talking next year about $500 to $600 billion of spend. So to put that in the context, it's roughly the same size as the SA economy being spent on AI, largely infrastructure, in 1 year. So it's multiples. People start to compare it to the size of different economies, multiples of the size of different stock markets. It really is spend on a scale that is quite unprecedented. And the big difference in this and the dot-com era is that there's 6 or 7 big companies doing it, and they have enormous cash flows. These aren't new businesses that have been invented and people are pricing them into the future. So they've got the capex to spend. But who knows whether you get a return on it. For the moment, they've got no option but to keep up in this race.
I mean, some of it makes sense to me. So at least I understand what NVIDIA does, right? It's making microchips. Now, the microchips and they're the ones that you need for AI. And for the moment, they've got a hot product. Now, maybe in 5 years they don't, but that's a different thing. But Palantir, for example, as I understand it, really I think someone called it the most overvalued company ever. I mean, that's a dangerous thing to say, but partly because of one license it gets from the US federal government that basically gives it access to security services. I mean, that could change quite dramatically and all sorts of things could happen as a result.
Yeah, I think Palantir is quite a unique one in that it's got its own peculiarities. I think if you look across the whole software stack and all the different businesses out there, computer software companies have actually come under quite a bit of pressure in the last while. And people are questioning the usefulness of a lot of what they're doing because AI will be able to replace it. So in fact, we haven't seen an overall, like the internet boom, everybody touched by AI has shot through the roof. It's been quite specific, and the market's differentiated between who they perceive will be the winners and who they perceive will be the losers.
If it turns out AI isn't going to change the world, sure, some people might lose money, but it may also depend on when we decide AI isn't going to change the world. And we would probably make that decision all at different times.
I think that's the thing with these. When you hear the word bubble, it doesn't mean run away and don't invest. These things can carry on for many, many years. And the things that we're taking exposure to in the AI space, even with AI is assisting them, but they're making money out of lots of other different things. And Amazon out of cloud, out of e-commerce, Meta out of internet advertising, etc. So there aren't too many where you're just doing an AI bet. NVIDIA probably sits into that category, and there's lots of other, fairly smallish businesses. But this is quite a unique stock market phenomenon where it's kind of 10 big companies are getting 90% of the benefit.
Impossible question, Peter. I mean, how much longer does it go on like this before something happens? I mean, it's an unbelievable amount of money, as you point out, the size of the South African economy. I mean, does it go on like this for another 2 years?
Yeah, so I think, we personally, I thought 6 months ago that things had peaked 6 months before. It's very clear that people have to carry on spending. And it carries on as long as people have the perception that the pace of change and what AI can do will continue to accelerate. And I think there's still a few years of that to come. So I think just practically the law of numbers means the big spend, the spend they're talking about next year, it's hard to conceptualize it being much bigger. It makes the world seem like quite a small place. So the rate of change and the growth of spend has to slow and maybe even stops. But I think it still stays at an enormously high level.
All of this is really about wanting to be sort of first. And there's a sort of perception, I suppose, that if you aren't first in the AI game, you're last. But what we've seen with innovation is that often it's the company that's not first. It's the company that's second or third. Think of Apple, for example, that makes all the money.
Yeah, absolutely. We were sitting in an AI strategy session the other day with an expert from America and asking him what to use. And it boils down to, is it Copilot? Is it Gemini? Is it ChatGPT? And because I'm not really going to want to use one or two of them, or more than one or two of them. We do have specialist needs, or there'll be kind of niche ones. We found guys in an Indian company in the financial analysis space. But it's, I think over 5 years, there'll be people you haven't heard of today who catch up. We're at the beginning of an industry. It's pioneers out there. So we're placing a diversified bet across the big players, but constantly looking out for the new guy on the block.
Peter Armitage, thanks very much. Really do appreciate the time. It's a fascinating question. The CEO at Anchor Capital. You're with The Money Show. It's 7 o'clock.
And now, The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa CIB, equipping you with efficient and secure cash management solutions for your business. Well, good to have you along. 8 minutes now after 7. I'm Stephen Grootes, talking about online gambling just a few moments ago. Interesting to sort of see one of the arguments for it, of course, is the idea then that it's probably properly regulated. And you know that online gambling can happen entirely illegally. Money would be going out of the country, etc., etc., etc. And of course, with cryptocurrencies, may well become just impossible to trace. I'm not sure myself where this is going to all end. Do any of us ever really know? I am aware, though, and I know people will say, well, people must make up their own minds about what they spend money on. But if you look at how things are what I would call gamified, in other words, think of the games that your children, your teenagers play if they have a console. There is someone there employed to make them cool and interesting and to keep them playing for longer. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Speaking as a parent, I have issues with that, and I think I'm allowed to. If you look at how addictive Fortnite, one particular game, seems to be, try and get your teenager off it. Just try. I dare you. See how long it takes you. And that tells you something. Now, I suppose a good book could be addictive too, but I don't think it's in quite the same way or in quite the same thing. So I do think that online gambling is something we need to talk about. There's another aspect of it, by the way, which is that this is all being regulated, as I understand it, through provincial gambling boards. And I do wonder if actually this needs to be handled in some other way. Because what happens then is that each province vies with the other provinces to have the easiest regulations because they want the money. And that's not a good way to do it. It's how Delaware became the kind of corporate capital of the US. They made it easier there to have their headquarters, corporate headquarters there than anywhere else, even though it's a tiny state. And so they took advantage of that. There's got to be a different way to handle this, I suspect. 011 883 0702 and 0214 446 0567.
702. Stephen is on the Money Show.
6 to 8 p.m.
We'll talk more in just a moment about the what really must have been the assassination of Boa van Niekerk. Also this evening, Bronwyn Williams, your trend translator, but also book reviewer. The book we're looking at tonight is The Adaptability Code, Recoding the DNA of Future-Ready Leadership by Mashambi Mutumba. And then Snentlantla Maduna and her ongoing love affair with earthworms will be how you make your money from 7:30 this evening.
702 with Stephen Grootes.
Email him on stephen@702.co.za.
Well, you can imagine the horror that I think has greeted the killing of the insolvency lawyer Boa van Niekerk after being shot dead in his offices on Friday. He was investigating a company called NTC Global Trade. It's being accused of being a Ponzi scheme. The Financial Conduct Authority said some time ago that, in fact, they might have been offering unregistered financial services. Kieran Ryan is a freelance journalist who often appears on MoneyWeb. Kieran, good evening. I do appreciate the time. Thank you. As I understand it, the people who killed Boa van Niekerk made an appointment at his office. They waited for him to appear, and then they shot him dead. I mean, I can't think of a clearer example of a hit.
Yeah, well, the police have confirmed it. It was a hit. They confirmed it today. I mean, it's obvious to everybody looking or reading about this case that's exactly what happened. And the interesting thing is that he had been warned a couple of times before that, but he decided to, tough it out and said, bring it on. And he was quite a tough guy. He was involved. He's very prominent back in the day when Optimum Coal was being put under business rescue, and he was the lawyer. He handled north of 100 cases before the court. A lot of the Gupta companies were contesting, and there were people trying to liquidate the company, and all sorts of shenanigans going on there with Optimum Coal and other Gupta companies, and he handled pretty much all of that. And his colleague, the business rescue practitioner involved in that, was Kurt Knoop, and he resigned on Friday, citing that he just didn't want to deal anymore with the business rescue of this company you just mentioned, NTC Global Trade, which had been flagged by the Financial Sector Conduct Authority as possibly not operating with a license when it should have been. And so in his resignation letter, he named the company, which clearly, he's pointing the finger somewhere. We don't know yet. I mean, that would be very premature to say who is responsible at this point. But we know that both Kurt, he did have death threats himself, and so did Boa van Niekerk. And what apparently happened was the killers, he didn't know they were killers at the time, asked for a face-to-face meeting with him in the Smitsu offices in Saxonwold in Joburg. They arrived. It was 10 o'clock on Friday morning. And I know this from somebody who does have information about this, that he walked into the boardroom there and introduced himself and was promptly shot twice in the head. And then the two suspects fled. There were others in the car. So the police are now looking for 4 suspects. One would imagine that they would have some fairly good leads because there would be, evidence of the car, the license plate, and there would be some visual recognition, perhaps from the staff who were there, who ushered these 2 killers into the boardroom.
It's an incredible story. I mean, you kind of want to hope the police will track down the people who did it. And then there'll be a court case and the people who did it will tell us who paid them to do it, if it's a hit, and it was a hit. Unfortunately, Kieran, I mean, when you consider all of the heat that we have right now around political killings for hire, Inkabi, hitmen, etc., the whole bit, I'm afraid I just don't expect that to be the outcome. The outcome might be an arrest. It might even be the conviction of the people who pulled the trigger. I would be utterly amazed, happily amazed, if we ever found out who was really responsible for this.
Yeah, I agree, because if you look at some of the other cases that have happened which are similar, where there have been hits, and by the way, there have been studies on the growth in the assassination industry in South Africa. It is quite alarming, and it's not something that we can be proud of at all. But if you look at the killing of Babita Deokaran, that was back in 2023, there are 6 people behind bars for that. But the masterminds, which are, there's rumors and there's a lot of gossip going around, but they remain at large. And it's the same with the other allegations, not so much allegations of killings. There have been a number. For example, Grootes Murray and his son Thomas, they were killed near Midrand on the N1 highway in 2023. And they'd been involved in the liquidation of Bosasa, which was very closely linked to a number of high-profile ANC individuals, featured very prominently in the Zondo Commission of Inquiry into state capture for corrupt prison supply tenders. Also, Trillion Capital, which is featured, pages, hundreds of pages in the Zondo report. Nobody has been arrested for that particular murder. They were investigating 2 companies at the time, Big Business Innovations and I2 Infinite Innovations, which owed Investec about 200 million. So there are rumors as to who's behind that, but still, astonishingly, no arrest being made in that case. And so it goes on. There's been, just this year, there was an auditor at Ekurhuleni Municipality, and Paul Mafole. He was killed on the 30th of June in Kempton Park while he was investigating corruption involving about 4 billion in dodgy contracts. One suspect has been arrested. There's a second one still at large on that one. And on top of that, you've got staff at the Auditor General South Africa. Just about every year it comes up. It's not something that they like to talk about, and I understand that, because the more you discuss this, the more credibility or more power it seems to give to these hitmen. But some staff have been shot, and intimidation is quite common, apparently.
I mean, all this does is discourage people from asking too many questions, and I mean, who can blame them?
Yes, exactly. And I spoke to a couple of business rescue practitioners on Friday after this happened. I mean, of course, they're shocked, but I asked them, have you been threatened? And apparently it's quite common. And the advice from one guy I spoke to said, if you get threatened and you get told to get off the case, do so, because you've got to take these threats seriously. You don't have security. This is another problem that the South African Insolvency Practitioners Association wants to address, is getting more security for these high... Who would have thought that being an accountant or being an auditor, a forensic auditor, or a business rescue practitioner would become a high-risk profession in South Africa? But this is where we are.
Sure.
Now, they want the courts to start actually allocating more funds for security for these individuals who are doing this kind of work.
Of course. Kieran Ryan, thanks so much. Freelance journalist at MoneyWeb. I mean, that is the signal it sends. How do you get around that? Well, what you need is proper police work. You need to find the people who did it. You need to connect dots after that. You need to follow cell phone evidence. We've seen in the Senzo Mieo case how cell phone evidence can change the sort of narrative, the understanding of what's actually going on. The people who are accused of the murder, one of them was in contact with someone else who it turns out was linked to Senzo Mieo. The same thing can happen in this case. There is so much that needs to be done in these cases. And by the way, while we are talking about Boa Fanika, and so we should, and we have been talking about Babita Deokaran or Grootes Murray, there are plenty of other people we need to talk about as well, and particularly in the space around political killings. 19 minutes after 7.
The Money Show.
Business books.
Well, plenty of books, as you know, around leadership. Today's book, The Adaptability Code, Recoding the DNA of Future-Ready Leadership by Mushambi Matuma. Bronwyn Williams is the trend translator and future finance specialist at Flux Trends. Good evening, Bronwyn. Good to have you back. The Adaptability Code, there's certain things that make a good leader, according to Mushambi Matuma. What does it tell us?
Well, it basically does what it says on the can. The adaptability code is business book that kind of highlights quite a lot of the common sense that is required for business today. So it's basically the kind of answer to the, what do they call it, VUCA or Bainey world. And I'm sure there's a few more acronyms that are floating around by now. But in essence, he's really talking about exactly that. The leaders need to be more adaptable. And specifically, what they need to do is start investing in tools like foresight to build their resilience and to become more anticipatory and adaptable. So basically, he's done a wonderful job writing a book to essentially sell the services of futurists and foresight practitioners like myself. So shout out to him for paving the way, for proving the importance of the work we do.
So basically, it talks about what makes a good leader and things like foresight. And some of that is about, I mean, in some ways, it's a bit of common sense. You do want someone who can understand what's going to come next, and you want someone who can survive shocks.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, this is certainly not the only book written on this topic, but it is a topic that is particularly topical at the moment. I think Rich Mulholland also has a book out now on relentless relevance, which is also about this idea of adapting and reinventing yourself. And Craig Wing's book that we've spoken about on this show also speaks about that, having this sort of mindset that can see you through different seasons of change. It is very much the topic of the moment because business as usual just simply isn't working pretty much anywhere that you look. If you look at the luxury fashion houses and how they're being disrupted at the moment. If you look at economies that have done well in the past that suddenly aren't. If you look at big banks, even here in South Africa, who suddenly have competition thanks to like the Reserve Bank opening up licenses for fintechs. Suddenly the things that got you here are not the things that are going to get you where we're going next. And I think this season of change that we're in at the moment has forced a lot of organizations, all the way up from the UN right down to small mom and pop shops, having to reevaluate their business proposition and understand that the sort of people that you hired previously, the kind of mindsets that you recruited for previously, the strategies that used to succeed previously just are not going to get you through the seasons of change ahead. Like some of your listeners might be familiar with the work of Strauss and Co., who did their whole fourth turning thing, which speaks about how the world goes through these generational cycles of some of them more peaceful, some of them more full of contest and conflict and ambiguity. And we're certainly in one of those, as they call them, winter seasons or unravelings, which is another way to look at it at the moment, which is unraveling a lot of the things that we had taken for granted previously. So as I said, this is not a new idea. It's not an idea that we haven't even spoken about on this show, but it's an idea for which there is demand from publishers and from business leaders and from individuals who are suddenly facing a reckoning about what am I going to do to get through these next few years, because the skills that I have, the degrees I've invested in, the networks I've built, the supply chains I've spent years, maybe decades putting together, suddenly they're just not as stable as they used to be. So if it used to be the sorts of people that you recruited for in your graduate programs and the sort of CEOs that you promoted into those positions came from fields like accounting. But a little bird has told me that some of our biggest recruiters, particularly the banks in this country, are now no longer recruiting CAs into their graduate programs next year. They're going to be recruiting more engineers and people who can code and program because they're looking for that different mindset. And that's why books like this are so topical at the moment. It's a season of change.
I noticed that one of the elements that they look for in a leader is curiosity. I find that very interesting. I mean, I'm sort of on a bit of a curiosity kick at the moment. I blame Ted Lasso. But curiosity is something that you need to actually have. You need to be curious about what is going to happen next and how to do it. It needs to be something you actually actively think about for fun.
Yes, exactly. I mean, this is one of the core tenets of foresight too. The foundation of the field is noticing things, and you don't notice things unless you're looking for things, and you're less likely to look for things unless you are curious. So curiosity is one of those things that's suitable for the current context, but it wasn't something that was exactly rewarded in corporate hierarchies not so long ago, right? I mean, it wasn't the greatest strategic career move to stick your hand up and ask questions or to challenge leadership, but now it's becoming an essential skill. So you see companies, leadership teams, leadership structures having to unlearn, as they say, all this behavior that used to reward you, for progressing in your career. So being curious, asking questions, taking risks, which is really what curiosity is kind of code for, right? It's going where you haven't gone before, trying something new, all of which has a degree of risk to it. suddenly becomes the less risky strategy in a completely risk-on context.
And the other one was care. And I mean, I know there's a lot that's sort of spoken about this. But I do think care is something that people you are leading respond to.
Yes, absolutely. Care is one of those things we see popping up in all sorts of places at the moment. And actually, Carmen Murray, the lady who put me onto this particular book, is organizing an event. She runs a leadership forum called the Conscious Leaders. That's all about female leadership empowerment. And her core tenets are foresight intelligence and, empathetic intelligence and all these different types of intelligence, but both empathy and foresight fall very much within the work that she's doing with corporates and individuals and entrepreneurs. And it is coming through stronger. Again, this is not part of your traditional management playbook, which used to be about maintaining, it used to be about structure, it used to be about order, it used to be about avoiding curiosity and sticking to the plan. And now suddenly you're having to add in and layer in these things that don't come naturally, that are about curiosity, about risk, about adaptability, about foresight rather than about today, about care, about compassion, and about, as Ronan Ayers, another person we've mentioned on this show previously for his book Breach, talks about with younger employees in particular, requiring what he terms to be the momager. This idea of a more maternal, caring type leader is what younger employees are looking for at the moment. In fact, outright demanding if they're going to have any sort of loyalty to your firm.
Bronwyn Williams, thanks so much. Trend translator and then future finance specialist at Flux Trends. 28 minutes after 7.
The Money Show. How I make my money.
24 minutes now to 8 the time. Well, where did you last spend some time, some quality time, with earthworms? Was it when you were a kid? Or are you someone who likes gardening, getting your hands dirty, looking at them wriggle as they come out? I know some people who love a good earthworm and will talk about the role they play in managing our ecosystem. Well, someone who I think is a better person than I and has no trouble getting her hands dirty, and in fact is making her career, her money out of earthworms, is Snantlantla Maduna. She's an educator, a vermiculturalist, and an entrepreneur. Snantlantla, good evening. It's wonderful to meet you.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
I got to start with the obvious question. Why earthworms?
Oh, man. Why earthworms? It's so hard to respond, but earthworms
Yeah. We seem to have lost that line to Snantlantla. Sorry about that. We'll try and get her back for you because I think she was just about to start explaining to you the situation as to why it was that she quite likes an earthworm, but also how you make money out of it, I think is one of the other questions, of course, which is what makes this all so interesting. I do think there is something about the role that they play that I think can be quite important. I think there are other things around this as well. So, Snantlantla, you're back with us again. I just asked you, why earthworms?
I was interested in growing plants, but then over time I became more interested in how to make the soil actually healthier.
Yeah, so earthworms followed from there?
Sorry?
So earthworms followed from there?
Yes.
Was there something in particular about them that you like?
I could say I actually grew up surrounded by gardening. My grandmother loved working the soil, so sometimes she'd ask me to help her with watering plants, and that love of growing things rubbed off on me. And finding out that worms can do so much, yes.
What is it that worms do?
So they turn waste into an organic, rich compost filled with nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, all these main foods that the plants actually need.
Do we know much about what's going on inside them that allows them to do that, to sort of, produce these materials that plants need so much?
Sorry?
Do we know much about what's going on inside them that allows them to produce these materials that plants need so much? Oh, dearie me. we seem to have lost that line again. Sorry about this. I mean, look, this does happen. Sometimes guests obviously are put in places where they have to go somewhere else or very quickly, or aren't able to be as comfortable as they would like to be when they are talking to you. And often, of course, most of the guests on The Money Show are people who tend to be quite busy. So you can imagine how this does actually happen from time to time. I have to say that I know people who've done some interesting things. I remember one of the conversations we had was with someone who, for a living, cleans up crime scenes, but it is not very often that we actually speak to someone who is making a living like this around earthworms and things like that. So yeah, it is a very interesting thing to be talking about. I think also you'll probably find that there are all sorts of links to other industries and other things that are connected to it that plays really quite a big role in the ability to actually make money out of it. So that is one of the things that is really important in this. And so, yeah, lots to talk about here. 20 minutes to 8.
The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
and DSTV channel 856.
All right, I think we are going to battle, I'm afraid, to get hold of Snentlantla Maduna. We do apologize for this. Someone who we'd actually been chasing for quite a while to have this conversation with, just to sort of, discuss with her the issues that go into her business, and to discuss as well and to learn from some of the issues that go into her business. It's not very often, as I say, that you meet someone who is able to do that. One of the things I have noticed in some of the conversations we've had with people in this feature, both this feature and Shapeshifter, is how many people are affected by something that happened as a child. In the case of Ntlantla, it was something that happened with her grandmother. We have had other cases I've noticed where people come into something because of something that happened regarding regarding a parent or a grandparent, but something that happened while they were a child. And I think that is what makes this so interesting. It's one of the interesting things about this feature, of course, is what is it that makes someone really understand, what is it that drives someone into something and catches their interest. And I don't know about you, but so often you really are looking for something when you've got a child, when you've got a young person, who really wants to do something, to try and give them some kind of direction. It's not always that easy. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not. And that, I think, is what, makes this so interesting. So, yeah, talking about that on The Money Show this evening. And, of course, there'll be other issues that come out of it as well. I mean, not everybody is able to take what they want to do and go from there. So, that is the issue that you can imagine, is how you actually get someone to take to actually have a look at what's happening and how you got there. It's 18 minutes now to 8 o'clock.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA CIB, equipping you with efficient and secure cash management solutions for your business.
All right, I do apologize. Unfortunately, unable to get to Snentlantla Maduna, and there is a long conversation to have with her about how she makes her money. But we did think that you might wish to hear from the color analyst and forecaster Lisa Taylor. We spoke to her some time ago. It was one of the most interesting conversations I've ever had with another human being. And I started by asking her if she had always known that she had a different relationship with color.
My mom said that if she didn't dress me in a certain color for a certain day, I would cry buckets or refuse to dress at all. In fact, there's one picture of me standing in the naked, just a hat and shoes, and crying my heart out because she wouldn't dress me in that particular dress. So I have been obsessed with color and how it affects people around me and myself, and that's called synthenesia.
I didn't know there was a name. So I didn't know there was a name for it.
So there is a name for it, yes. A lot of artists are said to have synthenesia. There's a lot of musicians. The color and music is related as well. Music is chords and harmony, as is color measurement.
So you knew you had this sense.
Yes.
You, I presume, had to go through school. I imagine your colouring in was a lot better than mine. What did you do?
I never coloured in the lines.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
No. Definite ADHD.
Okay. So, you have this, I don't know, do you see it as a gift?
Most times I see it as a gift. Sometimes it's not so much.
Yeah.
Because color is kind of overwhelming unless you learn to switch it off or filter it out.
So how do you then I'm sorry to interrupt. How do you then develop an interest in it? I mean, do you study art? Do you do something else? Do you just start to make a living? Where do you go from school is what I'm asking.
Well, I went from school into architecture. I was the first intake of the Wits Technikon BTech course in architecture, which kind of gives my age away mentioning Wits Technikon and BTech, and qualified. My bursary, I was the last person to get a bursary with Anglo-American, and I worked in architecture, but I tended to job hop because as soon as I learned everything about hospital design or housing design, I would move on to the next practice. And in the 80s, that wasn't such a good thing on your CV. So every 18 months, hopping from job to job, I then decided to go into marketing because I can talk a hind leg of a donkey. Worked first off a steel company, roofing, the major roofing people, and then on to paint, which was awesome because I got to do color. And then I was headhunted by a granite company and spent another 3 years traveling the world with that. But my first love was always coming back to me. And I was hunting then the internet, trying to find out about this ability of mine with color and synesthesia, which I didn't know at that time existed. And I came across the AIC and in turn the CSR in Pretoria, being a member of the AIC. The AIC is the International Colour Association. I went to the metrology laboratory. Boy, that's a difficult word to say. And it was like two people coming together. Yeah, I was this metrologist who's a colour scientist and me, semi-architect, marketer. And we came together and we literally went, blah, 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 blah. And she said, oh, by the way, we want to make NCS, and she touched the NCS Atlas. We want to make this the national standard because the Defence Force, who holds the heraldry of the country, I don't know whether you know that, that's the whole concept of defending the flag. They own the heraldry. They said our new flag, the 6 colours, the only flag in the world with so many different colours, it's very difficult to reproduce, so we want to make NCS the national standard. I, in turn, thought, an opportunity for business. I approached NCS, this was 1997, and for the next 2 years, I kept nagging them, saying, please let me be your distributor. And they referred to me as this mad woman from Africa. Eventually, in 1999, the MD came out to South Africa, and him and I went around a lot of paint manufacturers, and I started my business. And that's kind of, yeah.
So basically what you were doing is you were categorizing colors, right? So measuring color. Okay. So you get white, off-white, cream. I mean, would those be examples of what to me might be white, but to you are 3 different things?
No, what you get is 6 elementary colors, white and black at the top and the bottom, and then the 4 elementary colors of yellow, red, blue, and green. And with those 6 elementary colors, you can actually measure the 10 million colors the human eye can see. And give a value and communicate that across the world.
Can your eye and my eye, despite the fact that I have no understanding of color, I'm married to someone who has a deep understanding of color, and I do feel for her, but do both of our eyes see the same number of colors, even though your brain clearly interacts with it very differently to mine?
We've researched, and yes, we have matched the 10 million colors the human eye can see. We have researched, and every human being sees color the same, given normal color vision. But where the difference comes in is when it goes to the central process of the brain, we don't have equal preference. So we react emotionally differently to the color. And that's the only difference. Why would we need color standards otherwise if we don't see color the same?
So when you
you as a man will only see 7 million colors, and me as the privileged woman see 10 million colors. We are better.
Really? Why is that? Is that a brain difference or an eye difference?
It's to do with the central process of the brain. You as a man with a hunter, so you had to throw the spear in the distance and knock off the antelope. As a woman, I was gathering the berries and looking for the ripe and what was poisonous and what wasn't. So I had to come up with seeing differences in color, whereas you had to see in distance. And that's the only reason. But the woman carries the color defect gene, so we pass it on to our sons.
Sure. I had no idea about any of that. Okay, so
come and do one of my color courses.
Wasted money on me. I just want to go back a little bit. So there are 10 million colors. I would imagine coming up with 10 million names for colors might take a little while. So I presume we use a numbering system for this?
Numbering system only. So for instance, a red that I think your glasses, that would be defined as S15, 60, red 20% blue. So that gives a value. So that's 15% blackness, 60% chromaticness, and it's red 20% blue.
Okay. You're going to have to explain blackness and chromaticness to me now.
Okay. Blackness is the percentage of how much blackness is in the color, and chromaticness is the resemblance to the 4 elementary colors of either yellow, red, blue, or green.
Okay. And when you see a color, with your sort of sense of it, do you know what number it is, or is that asking too much? I mean, that must be asking too much.
Normally, most people, even with training, would still need a standard, would still need an instrument, because we have spectrophotometers, we have color readers, and we have color atlases and standards. But I can, to a certain extent, I'd still have to check myself. It's impossible to have the value and the numbering system in your mind of 10 million colors.
Yeah, no, I think that would be strange.
But it's kind of difficult.
And I don't know if you know this about humans being, Lisa, but we can argue about anything. Yes. Do people argue about a color standard, or is it pretty much accepted by people in the field?
Okay, color standards, yes, people would, and as soon as they see a number, because we're kind of a Calvinistic society, we see that numbers are okay and we're happy with that. But as soon as you give a name to that color, that name becomes an emotive issue. And that's where we can start arguing with that sort of thing. But if you have an instrument and you say, right, fine, that's measuring the color and I've checked it against a physical standard, I'm okay with it. But yeah, we'll argue if it's on the wall, because then people don't factor in light. They don't factor in a whole lot of other, simultaneous contrast of another object against that wall as well.
So I could say that's angry purple, and you could say, no, it's just peaceful purple, and someone else could say it's, I don't know, confused purple or something.
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, there's a test that we do to introduce at a big group of people to get people relaxed, in that you have to describe the color in terms of how you are reacting to it. And it's always a nice icebreaker when you start a big conference or a talk or something like that.
We're speaking to Lisa Taylor. She's a color analyst, forecaster, and trainer, all about how she's made money out of color.
The Money Show. How I make my money.
Speaking to Lisa Taylor, the color analyst, forecaster, and trainer. Lisa, you spoke about meeting a person who clearly spoke the same language, had the same sense of you about color. Are there many people like you that you've bumped into in South Africa. I mean, when my producer explained who we were talking to, I scratched my head a little bit because I'd never heard of such a thing.
You know, in the beginning, 1999, 2000, I was kind of a lone voice, and it was difficult. But there's been, as globalization has hit us and more companies have come in, there's more and more people talking color. So yes, that black and white TV years ago, I think we were pretty much in there, in that niche. And there's a lot more people out there now. It's much more friendly for me, I must say.
Still feels like we were with He-Man, though. I suppose there's another way to, let me put the question like this. Why does color matter? And I'm really asking about the link that you made at the very beginning about emotion. So I've been into a house or a room and thought, I don't quite like it here. I don't know why. And I've been into another room where it's the same physical size and felt a lot better. My wife has pointed out later, it's because one was a dark shade of brown or something awful. I mean, color really does affect your mood, is the point I'm making.
Well, color is psychology. Because it's created in the psyche, therefore it is psychology. You can manipulate people just by having different colors on your walls. And that's why light is also so important. In the beginning of my business, I actually used to go home halfway through the day to change my outfit so that I would be reflecting where we were in the negotiations. So I'd start off with an orange and then go back to change into a green suit so that I'm now formalizing the contract. It's that important. And I would also make sure that I talk to the MD's PA as I walk in and say, gosh, you know, you've got all these beige walls around you. Do you suffer from a lot of migraines or headaches? And they go, oh, yes, golly, yeah, I really do. And my business card is a red card. And I say, just put this at eye level in front of you and watch your headaches disappear. And then the next time I go in, the receptionist or the PA comes rushing out and grabs me and goes, oh, my God, you're a miracle worker. My headache's gone. How do you do this? And drags me into everybody's office that I've been wanting to meet. Because now I'm somebody that seems to know what they're talking about. And meanwhile, all I've offered her is a little a focus on the beige walls that we have around us. And now, obviously, the popular grey, which is also happening, there is lack of colour, so they're not being stimulated.
And you mentioned red, and we all know that red grabs your attention, but I sometimes feel I'm surrounded by so much red as a result of that. I actually wonder if we can suffer from red exhaustion sometimes. It just loses its power.
Absolutely. We've done research which was presented at a conference in Thailand in 2014, where subjects were put in a red room and then asked when the thermometer was turned down, when they felt cold, and then put in a blue room and asked the same question. And in a red room, they would say, I'm warm, I'm fine, but I'm not entirely happy. In the blue room, they'd be freezing cold in a very short space of time.
Lisa Taylor there, that conversation from a couple of months ago. Sorry again about Snantlantla. Unfortunately, we were unable to speak to the guest who was set up, but Lisa Taylor is the colour analyst and forecaster. And isn't it just the most interesting conversation around something that is all around us, and yet we don't think about very much?
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa CIB, equipping you with efficient and secure cash management solutions for your business.
Well, U.S. markets, by and large, looking up. Still a lot of uncertainty around, but expecting, of course, that the U.S. Federal Reserve will cut interest rates next week. The Dow Jones is down 0.04%. The Nasdaq is up 0.5%. And the S&P 500 is up 0.16% at the moment. We'll have a lot more for you tomorrow. Good evening. It's 8 o'clock.